Good evening and welcome to the show. Tonight we're looking at how the first 7 years of a human being's life manifests in their adulthood and why this so-called blueprint period is so critical with regards to the development. Now, in one of my previous shows we have touched on the subject, but purely from an academic point of view in terms of preschool selection. Now, tonight we are looking at it from the top down, so to speak, and we explore adult issues that have their roots in childhood experiences. I think you'll be quite surprised to learn that a lot of who we are today as adults took shape during our blueprint years. Well, my columns this week deals with the subject, and you can read them on parent24.com, smn.co.za, and obviously in the Saturday Star newspaper. As always, remember you can join me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter at Who's Your Daddy #8, or just drop me an email. I'd love to hear your views on any of the shows so far. And also don't forget, if you've missed any of my previous shows, they are available for viewing on YouTube. Just search for Who's Your Daddy or search my name and you're bound to find it. Well, my guests tonight are educational psychologist Layla Abdul Ghafoor, who's been on the show before to talk to us about the importance of discipline, you'll remember. Welcome back, Layla.
Thank you.
And also welcome to Bongani. Bongani, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You've had a particularly traumatic experience with regards to your childhood. You were interviewed recently by Masanda Peter, fellow columnist on Parent24, about your experience. And I read it and it was pretty haunting for me. Tell us a bit about what happened to you.
Well, I don't know about traumatic. For me, it has never been anything of a trauma in that sense, but it has been something that, fortunately enough, has been able to shape me and also to shape the path, which like obviously I had to sort of lead. And because I have siblings, not only from my biological mother, but from my adoptive family as well, as I refer to them. And I also have friends, whom obviously have brothers and, they've got kids as well, I wouldn't sort of like them to see, their kids going through the same thing because it's not quite interesting.
What actually happened?
Well, with me, it was quite a different one because not that I didn't have a family. I had a stable family. I had a mother, who was doing very well. I mean, my mother was a psychiatric nurse.
Okay.
And a qualified one, I had a grandmother, who was very loving, and I had uncles, in the family. Unfortunately, it wasn't a dysfunctional family to say. However, my own mother, my biological mother, as I refer to, sort of was living a different life, from what you would expect from a mother. And my mother was quite loose, for lack of a better word, like as a lady, right. I don't think that she led her life as a lady. Okay. I think it was more of a kid and a teenager, right. in her adulthood, and obviously she, obviously used to change, men in terms of like dating, So as a child, I don't think you want to experience that. I can see that. So I saw that from an early age, from about the age of 10, experiencing all that, your mother bringing home a different man all the time, And I think at first you sort of say it's okay because you don't really know what's happening. You don't see what's happening until the real stuff now happens. You sharing like a house, outside a house because it has a roof on it, but you're sharing like a 1-bedroom house, which is everything on it. It's a kitchen, it's a lounge, it's a bedroom, everything else, and you're sleeping right there where your own mother, you know what I mean, excite and entertain herself with a different man.
But now tell me, you said in the beginning it was okay in terms of your up until 10.
Yes.
So when did your mom get involved in this stuff, or was it always there but you only became aware of it at 10?
I think I only became aware of it at that age, actually. I'm like at 10, because when you're young, you don't really try as hard as you can to try and see what is happening. But it's sort of thing, like they're friends. You go up saying they're friends. Because see, in a black community, we call them borangwane, malume, uncles, so that they deviate you from, the thought of saying, he's, my father. Because, I've always wanted to know who my father was from an early age. But I never questioned that.
Do you know who your father is?
Now I know who my father is. I know my daddy. But unfortunately, I knew my father later. Okay. I only found out about my family about 5 years ago. Yeah. Obviously, I was overseas at the time when I found out about my family. But at that age, I didn't really know what was happening until the age of 10, 11-ish. I think that's when everything started to really boiling out.
And then how did you experience it? As a 10-year-old kid, you're suddenly realizing, hold on a second, these aren't uncles. They're coming in here and they're getting up to, mischief with my mom.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that. I mean, how do you process that?
It started, I think, when the first one tried to be a daddy.
Okay.
And I refused for him to be a daddy, because with me, you can't, send me to go buy, like a quart of liquor or quart of beer or something. So at that time, the guy had asked me to go buy beer for him. And I was like, I refused. So when I refused, I got a nice hiding, a beautiful hiding. And unfortunately, my mother just stood there and did nothing, And another one came and did almost like the same thing. She stood there and did nothing, Then I started questioning her presence in my life at the time to say, who are these guys? Who are these men? And that made things even worse because now I got hiding from my own biological mother for asking, And then an incident happened, one worse incident, one when I experienced my mother, being intimate with one of those guys, At that age.
You actually saw this?
I experienced it. I literally stood there and I watched.
Good God.
Because you don't know what's happening. At the time, you don't know what's happening. But you sort of have an idea because he has a man there, he's butt naked, she's butt naked.
Was she aware of it? Did she know that you were watching?
They realized later that's what changed everything at the time. So it was like a breakthrough for all of us, if I could say that, because when he noticed that I was sort of watching, the whole scene, he then came and gave me a nice hiding, That's where the hanging, that's where the hanging, started from, because he literally took me and hung me, and beat me up with we call it like umgala in Zulu. Umgala is a pit digger. So he hit me with that so hard, and with your mother just, standing there and doing nothing, it's a bit traumatic, as a child. So that was a breakthrough for me.
Yeah. But you say breakthrough, how? I see one of the title of the column is You Forgive Your Mom.
Yes, Mama, I forgive you.
Mama, I forgive you,
yes.
Hectic stuff. I mean, so from the age of becoming aware, I mean, you're obviously not 10 anymore.
Yes.
How long did it take you to process all of this to be able to forgive her?
I wouldn't, be definite as to how long it took me to process it. But at the time, all I knew was that this is wrong.
Yeah.
It's not supposed to be happening this way. It's not supposed to be happening when I'm here. So when I asked, the whole thing happened because I asked, what is happening? And the answer was simple. You are a kid. So, I mean, from a childhood stage, I never wanted someone to tell me that I'm a kid. Because like even now, if I ask you something and you say I'm a kid, it puts me in a different place. Because now you're saying to me, I do not have any rights to ask. Because that was my emotional right at the time. But it was a breakthrough in a sense that for me, having experienced that, it gave me a different idea and a different view and picture of where I want to go. Because that's when I questioned, the real question, who is my father?
Phew, hectic. Leila, as a psychologist, I mean, this is probably a psychologist's wet dream, pardon the pun, to deal with an issue like this. I mean, I'm not making light of it in any way. Sure. Yes, and I don't know, Bongani, have you had psychological or therapy to deal with this, or have you just sorted it out on your own?
I've never had a reason to go for therapy because I saw that and I chose not to let it affect me, from an early age.
I think you're quite strong in that regard.
I chose not to let it get to me, from an early age actually, because I've never been, when we were growing up, we used to get position 1, position 2 at school. I used to be angry when I got position 2. I've always been an A student,
Wow.
So I don't have, I don't know, I never had any reason to go like I see a therapist.
Bongani, thanks a lot for sharing that with us. We're going to get back to some of the mechanisms you used to get there.
Yes.
Leila, the first 7 years, obviously this is an extreme case. God help us all that doesn't happen to everybody. This whole statement about the first 7 years being the blueprint, as I said, I've spoken about it before. Is there any truth in it, or is it just like a slogan that we've cottoned onto? Can you really see the adult in the first 7 years?
I think the first 7 years are so important because a lot of the developmental milestones are created, I mean, in terms of walking, talking, eating, teething, crawling, going to the bathroom. It's almost as if the child moves from being a baby to becoming a lot more independent. In 7, they're already going to grade 1, they're already going to school. They can function independently out of the family. And during those 7 years, a lot of socialization and shaping happens with the child. And that is essentially happening at home.
Yeah.
So especially if a child doesn't go to daycare or doesn't go to preschool or something like that, a lot of shaping happens then. Although later on, if something disastrous did happen during that time, it can be changed, and I think through resilience and a lot of insight into yourself and your life and who you'd like to be, as in Bongani's case, it can change. But for a lot of people, not everybody has that strength within them, and I think that's when they kind of need a little bit of extra help, or they need therapy or someone to talk to.
Now, when I had my show about the preschool selection, one of my guests spoke exactly what you're talking about, the developmental milestones. And I mean, you can understand that in terms of walking and all of that kind of stuff. But the psychological blueprint, so to speak, the things that are input into your psyche during this phase, like as in Bongani's case, but let's not dwell on the negative, positive stuff as well. Does that remain? Are you always going to be like that? The principal that was on my show spoke about if a child has an issue about getting up on stage and doing a performance, like if someone's shy. She said that's pretty much going to be the way that person's going to be like as an adult. They might learn ways to cope with that, but that is essentially who that person is.
I think you probably can change it, but it's going to take a lot of work to deal with it. For example, you know, sort of being on stage, if you have a bad experience for the rest of your life, until you overcome that fear, you're always going to feel scared to go on stage. You're always going to feel nervous when you have to do that. But I think that it can be changed, but it's got to come from within you, and it's got to come with a lot of hard work and a lot of insight. And I think in Bongani's case, that's what he's done to be able to overcome some of the boundaries and some of the difficulties that he's had in his life, you know, especially I'm sure in terms of relationships that you have with women and things like that, you know, it kind of all overplays.
I agree.
Positives, you're smiling there. I mean, I am feeling so sad for you, but you're sitting there so happy and smiling.
I think he's one of the most amazing people that I've ever met. I think that you really are an inspiration.
Well, I agree. I agree with Leila because, I mean, in terms of relationships, you know, although we can take it very lightly, your childhood, I'm not sure what I should say as a man or as a guy, you know, plays a role when you grow up in your relationships, you know, like in a big way. Because obviously, growing up like that, I had a different view of women, right? But then at the time, I didn't know what the difference is between a mother and a woman.
So what did you think? What was your view of women having that experience?
Well, at the time, I just thought that, you know, this element called a woman cannot be trusted. You know, this element called a woman cannot be viewed as a human being, but an animal at the time, you know, because I remember when I used to live in the streets, you know, most of our clients were women, you know, women that we robbed the most, you know, were even in my my mother's age group, because that's what I knew. That's what I knew better. So those were my best victims, best clients for me at the time. You know, so looking at women at that age, I just thought, you know what, there's nothing much more better than being with guys, with men, because women, you cannot trust them anymore, you know, at all. And as you grow up, you see that, because it affected my relationships as well, you know, because I would be very reserved.
But now you sound like a rocket scientist, that you've sort of experienced this thing, you've analyzed it, you didn't need therapy. Where did the insight come from? I mean, did you one day sit down and realize, I've got issues with women because of what's happened, and I need to do this to fix it? Because it sounds like that's exactly what you've done.
Well, this might sound very strange, but I have a friend now who I used to live with at the time, you know, in the streets, a female, you know, and we used to be very close, you know, we used to be very close. I think she played a huge role in terms of making me understand that not all women are like that, and at the same time, to make me realize that perhaps she was going through her own issues at the time, her own demons, her own relationship issues, psychological issues, because she was a psychiatric nurse. And having served for more than 26 years in a psychiatric hospital, chances are she could have experienced a lot of, you know, the very same,
so that was sort of your guardian
exactly, you know. So I tried,
a therapist in a way.
like in a big way, you know, because I look at my biological mother now and actually thank her. I'm grateful. Because I always wonder, what would I have been had I not gone through what I've gone through when I was young.
Whew, hectic stuff. Well, it's time for you to go make yourself a quick cup of tea. We'll be right back after this commercial break. Welcome back. Hope you enjoyed your tea. Do you remember your first 7 years? Were they good or bad or just so-so? And do you see the effects of that time manifest in your adult life? That's the question on the table tonight. And more importantly, how are you shaping your child's formative years right now? Bongani, I have to pay tribute to your strength of character. I mean, to sit there and talk about your experience is really commendable. So thanks for that. What I want to ask you is, do you have any kids right now?
I have a daughter.
You have a daughter. How old is she?
1 year, I hope I get it right because her mother always picks me up. 1 year, 9 months now.
Okay, and are you in a relationship with her mom?
We're trying to sort things out.
Okay, cool.
We're trying to sort things out.
Aren't we all? Yes. Layla's the only one who's managed to perfect it.
We're trying to sort things out. It's for the best.
Yeah. What have you learned in terms of your experience, and what advice would you give parents in terms of the influence that they have on their kids' lives in that critical stage?
You know, it's very difficult for me to answer that question. I'll tell you why. Because, I mean, I know that there's parenting experts, you know, there's parenting this and that. I think like an environment offers a lot more than heredity, all right? And if you take a child, if you take me and put me in New York, chances are I'll behave like New Yorkers, all right? But if you take me and put me with a lot of street kids, it's a choice. I can choose to be like them.
I like
So for me to sit here and say that parents can do this and do that, for the end of the day, as a parent, no parent tries not too hard to, you know, create a good child out of like their own children. So you have a choice as a child, but then obviously when you're 10, you don't really know what to do or what to say, and I don't think you know much about decisions. So all I can say from my own experience is that love, more than anything else, love is the best base. And understanding your children, making time for them, and most of all, listen to your children. Listen to your children. They don't always use words. Sometimes they use actions.
That's actually so true, because especially in therapy, when we work with little kids, we don't talk much.
You just listen. Layla, again, I'm so amazed by Bongani's experience and how he actually sort of healed himself. But there's somebody out there who's gone through something similar. Now, I know a lot of people in general, especially probably kids and teens and stuff who are going through troubled times, they view therapy as sort of a admission of weakness or admission of insanity. But I think the stigma is changing. People, our lives are so crazy these days, we need help. What sort of help can they expect from someone like you? I mean, what is the process of breaking these things down and repairing it and so on? Take away the scary part.
Okay, I think that the misconception about therapy is that there has to be something wrong with you for you to go to therapy, and that's not true. I think sometimes it's just nice to talk to a neutral person, just to have a bit of a chat, to get things out of your system, to chat about your week, just to try and de-stress a little bit. But in terms of specifically, you know, to deal with, say, a situation like Bongani's, if it's a child who's currently in that situation, we do something called play therapy, where we have a playroom and with lots of toys, and through the toys we talk and we, you know, work out what's going on. Remember, for children, they can't speak. Play is their means of communication. So, for example, the elephant may be fighting the dinosaur, and then you'd ask questions around, why are the elephant fighting the dinosaur? And then you realize the elephant may be dad and the dinosaur may be mom, and they've been fighting this week, and they explain to you exactly what's
would they be able to make that connection, or do you prompt them to make them realize?
You ask, you know, but you ask in a way sort of, I wonder if the dinosaur is perhaps daddy, which is fighting with mommy. And then the child, generally children are blatantly honest, and they generally do share, but obviously it takes a few sessions to develop trust before you can get to that level. And with an adult, you know, they've got to generally be ready to be able to talk about their experiences, but as they unpack the experiences and as they look at those experiences, they look at how it shaped them and how those experiences have made them stronger or taught them certain lessons, or how they can use those experiences to their benefit and help other people, and then make sure that they don't reenact what they have learned through their childhood onto their children and teach their children to behave in that way. So I think that therapy is a very important tool to understanding yourself further and getting to know yourself more.
And I think, and Bongani also touched on it, it's actually a choice. I mean, you've got to choose to want to be to change a certain behavioral pattern that you're not happy with.
It's definitely a choice. Look, therapy does not work unless you are someone who is open to that process.
So you've got to be honest. If you're going there, you've got to be honest with yourself.
You've got to make it work for you. You know, you're going for probably 1 hour a week, and you've got to make sure that during that whole week until your next session, you try and think about what happened in that session, try and use a few of the things. If your therapist has given you homework, do your homework. Try and almost get kind of your money's worth out of it, you know, kind of use it to the best of your ability so that you can try and build on yourself. That's why you've got to be ready for it when you go for it.
And in terms of the issues, I mean, I think I'm answering the question in my head here. How long is a piece of string? How long does it take to sort out? Does it depend on how much you put in and how, you know, how much you want it resolved? Or can you say that if someone has suffered this trauma, it will probably take so long? I mean, I know how people think about it. They think, I'm not going to go to therapy for months and months and months or for years and years. I mean, what's the sort of guidelines or the timing issues like?
You can't put time onto how long it will take for something, but the reality is that with funding, medical aids, recession, things like that, your client will say, I can only afford to have 5 sessions with you. And then you try in those 5 sessions to do as much as you can to help your client to try and deal with those issues. Then say your client says, okay, in maybe next year I can then afford another 10 issues. So you try, you know, 10 sessions. So you try and do as much as you can within what your client can afford. Although, I mean, if there wasn't a restriction, you would probably take as long as you need to be able to work through everything.
Now, just going back to Bongani's example and looking at parent-child relationships, I'm talking from a therapeutic perspective. Would it be helpful, for example, like let's say Bongani was 10 years old now, or taking back to being 11 and 10, him and his mom in your office. I mean, how do you even begin to unpack that? Do you need to see the two of them together? Do you need to see them separately? I mean,
I would most likely see Bongani on his own, and I would probably only want to be his therapist. His mom would probably have therapy with a separate therapist, although every few sessions I would see her to try and get her to be, you know, understand his process and what he's going through, and to try and support the therapy as much. But you need to form an alliance with that child. That child needs to feel safe with just his therapist and know that I am not sharing my therapist with my mom or with someone else. But what I would also do is train the mom to do something called filial therapy, which we train parents to do, where every day or every few days for 15 minutes a day, you put off your cell phone, put off the house phone, and say to your child, so what can I do with you, Bongani, for 15 minutes today? What do you want to do together? And then you play a game or you do something, and it builds the most amazing relationship between a child and a parent.
and that's 15 minutes. That's
15
all
minutes.
It takes, a day.
That's all it takes, but no cell phone, no texts, nothing else, and only let the child choose what he or she wants to do. Let them feel in control and feel special.
Well, I think that's a very good example. I'm actually going to try that. 15 minutes sounds short, but given my 2 little monkeys, I can go on quite long. Excuse me, Bongani. Obviously, you haven't had access to, as you said, to therapy.
Yes.
But I think you were fortunate to have that friend and that role model that you spoke about. What's your relationship with your mom like now?
You know what, it's quite strange. Actually, going back to what Ella said about trust. Trust is very important when you're a child. The reason why I think as growing up I refused, you know, I mean, I had all opportunities to go for therapy. I refused.
Okay, so you actually had?
Yes, a lot of opportunities. You know, I refused because I didn't trust anyone.
Laila just mentioned that.
I didn't trust anyone. And I mean, I grew up in a Catholic church, obviously, where we have, you know, like priests, you know, where you can go and you know, sit down with them and speak with them, you know. And I mean, I was offered a lot of opportunities when I was overseas. We said, go for therapy. And I was like, what therapy? I don't need therapy because I know what happened. I know what went wrong. I knew how to go out of that situation, you know, so I don't see a reason why I should go for therapy. But then obviously, moving forward, you sort of look at what you want to achieve. I think that makes it easy for you, because if you sit down and you suck and you look at the dark side of life, it makes your life even more difficult. All right. But the relationship with my mother has not been of the greatest. But I had to forgive her for me to be sane.
Have you,
you know,
sat down with her and had a chat and said, listen, Mom, what the heck? What happened? You know, why?
You know what? I refused to take her through that. I refused to take her through that because I thought that would be very unfair. Because I have dealt with it. I'm fine. Genuinely, I'm fine.
How is this guy? This is like
So taking her back would definitely defeat her, because I don't think at the time she knew what she was doing.
Okay.
She made a mistake. She made a huge mistake, which affected our relationship. You know, so I don't think it would be fair on her as a parent, as a mother.
Okay. I want to
do
stop
that.
you there and get Layla's input here, because you've made me remember something now. Sometimes kids that go through these kind of experiences, and it can be anything, like their parents might be alcoholics or whatever, they assume the adult role, and they try and help their parents.
They
with that.
start to
And I think that's,
parenticize.
I'm just amazed that he's actually considering his mother's feelings. He doesn't want to take her through that. And what you said now is just so incredibly mature, that she didn't know what she was doing. But I'm almost, my instinct is, we as the parents should know better. How can children be tasked to help dysfunctional parents?
When you said that, it actually made me angry, because I felt as if, because he didn't have a dad, he was probably almost the dad in the family, taking on that parental role, and he still is. You're protecting your mom. Remember something, when you have a child, it's a lifelong decision. And when you do have a child, I think you have to set yourself up mentally with that maturity to know that I'm now responsible for this child, for as long as that child, is then independent and then is completely separate, I need to put in whatever. But I think that Bongani is definitely quite a
It's a choice.
Strong.
It's a choice. Look, think of it this way. If I had to sit her down now and say, tell me what happened, what do you think her first reaction would be? She would either get upset, get very angry, and that would make me angry. And that would take me back and count all those moments, count all those situations, all those things. And that would hate me, like I was sort of, that would make me hate her. And you don't want to go through that, not only because you're trying to be a Christian child, but you're trying to be a fair child, not only to God, but for her own sake as well.
But it's also
because,
good to protect to protect himself, to keep himself.
To be happy, yes. She deserves the chance as well. So I think he deserves, to be respected, because to me that's respect more than anything else. Not because I can't question, what happened, but I'm feeling she's a mother, and like she's a parent still. She brought me here. As much as somebody else came in my life and took her road as a mother and adopted me and took me in.
Your other siblings, are they younger or older?
My adoptive brother's younger,
Okay.
2 younger brothers.
And is he aware of what went on? And
Well, with my younger brothers, actually didn't know until one of the articles on Soul magazine, when they read the article, and even my adoptive mother didn't know a lot about what had happened, actually, in my, teen years, from the age of 10 going up, because she found out from the magazine, Those are things that I kept.
okay, I was telling Layla before the show, next season we're going to go an hour long if we get a big enough sponsor, so I hope you're listening. But we've got to wrap up now. I think it's important, just in terms of the title of the show, it looks like the first 7 years are important, but there isn't anything that can happen to you that can't be undone, is what I'm hearing.
True.
So if you've had issues in your childhood and you're aren't able to deal with it, please remember that there is help out there. It's not too late. And I really sincerely hope you never have to go through what Bongani's gone through. But as you can see, he's turned it on his head, and he's just an amazing human being. Thanks for joining us tonight. We'll be back next week, same time, same place. Hope to see you then.